Welcome you all here to this webinar. We broadcast today from Gothenburg, and it's Biogas Väst. This project is called, it's me and Bosse running it. And this webinar is a second day in a three-part series where we go through first the regional perspective. And today, as you all know, we have the European perspective, and tomorrow we will have the national perspective. And we have a really interesting agenda for today. I really look forward to hear those speakers. I won't speak for very much longer, so you will have time to hear them. And we will get both insights and outlooks from different countries in Europe, and also on the total European level. What does the biogas development look like, and what can we see ahead? What are the challenges and opportunities for biogas in Europe? And by that, I think we should just get started with the program. And the first speaker I would like to welcome is Andrea Gerini. He's the Secretary General of NGVA. You're with us today, Andrea, from Italy. And I can see you, and your mic is on. I can see as well. You are, please, welcome to enter the digital stage.
Yes, thank you very much, and good morning to everyone. I hope that my screen now is sharing. So thank you very much for this invitation. I think that is a very timely discussion today as we are approaching the end of the year, and the European Green Deal is really, let me say, putting on the table a lot of legislative file that will strongly influence and shape the future of mobility and transport system. And it's really time that we try and raise our voice and show the case for natural gas, for CNG, LNG, especially highlighting the role of biomethane that is there to really quickly accelerate the decarbonization process that everybody is looking for. So I have prepared a few slides just to drive the discussion, and then I will be more than happy to try and reply to all the questions from the audience. So just starting with some number with the situation in Europe about CNG. The CNG market is growing steadily. We are now at 1.5 million vehicles running on our road. Are we happy about the increase? Yes and no. That's to say, we see that there is a steady growth, so there is a demand. Last year, we closed the market with approximately 70,000 CNG vehicles registered. This year, we expect it to be a little bit lower, maybe 20% less due to this particular year. But the real issue is that the signal, especially when we look to the passenger car side, are not very clear, and of course the legislative situation, and we will have the opportunity to discuss about also later on, is not so clear. So it's forcing and driving the attention more into the electrified solution, and so also the policies, the marketing positionment also from some OEMs are not giving the right signal to the market. But anyway, the business is still there, as we see. The infrastructure is following, and if we compare towards a few years ago, we realized that CNG stations are spreading also in the countries where typically, for instance, the market was only linked to the heavy-duty sector. I'm speaking, for instance, about Spain, about France, that are anyway slowly but constantly and steadily developing also CNG network for the passenger car and light commercial vehicle. What is impressive, I dare say, is on the LNG side. This is really a fast-growing market. We see here how fast the fleet is growing during the last 4 or 5 years. So we are now close to 14,000 vehicles running on our road. There are, of course, LNG trucks, but also coaches that are now proposed also on LNG, also for personal mobility. And the network also is growing. We registered from 80 to 90 new stations each year. And this year we are going to close to 340. You see here the number in this very moment. We are already close to these 340. What is interesting also to highlight also for the topic of today, so trying to focus on the biomethane, is that biomethane, that of course is already distributed as a CNG, is also starting being distributed as LNG. So today we can say that approximately 80% of LNG is composed with bio, and that is distributed across 22 stations out of these 335 that are mainly in your area, so in the Scandinavian countries and also in the UK, where there is a big also engagement in delivering LNG as a bio to the markets. As an overall situation, what we can see and say is that today more or less 17% of the natural gas that is consumed by the road transport sector is composed with biomethane. Sweden is a champion country in this, you know better than me, so you have very well phased out the natural gas and now running almost full with biomethane. And what is interesting, for instance, is to see the roadmap proposed by France that is correspond more or less with what we can propose as European roadmap. So today being close to a 20% of biomethane and targeting a 40% as an average value across Europe in 2030. With, of course, a long-term target to run bio or synthetic or looking to the net zero balance in 2050. So this is already an encouraging situation, is a concrete situation. There is a market, there is a very also nice example about the utilization of biomethane in the mobility sector, in the transport sector, and it's really interesting to see. This is the section that we have in the G-Mobility platform. It's really nice to see how easy it is through biomethane to really cross-link the bio-waste, the agricultural sector, together with the energy, mobility, and transport one. So really a low-hanging fruit that is there to support the transition of mobility. So this is where we are today. Why is important biomethane, and why we really need now to concentrate our effort in trying to break the mechanism that today is recognizing only electrified solution as a zero emission. Yes, this is the message from this chart. So moving out from this pure tailpipe approach that is just providing a partial view on carbon neutrality, and try to enter into the so-called life cycle assessment dimension, or the so-called cradle to grave greenhouse gas emission. You see here we have compared, taking the example of a C-segment vehicle, so a vehicle like a Volkswagen Golf, for instance, with a lifetime of 160,000 kilometers. The overall emission that are emitted during its lifetime, and the blue composed by the manufacturing part, the orange coming from the fuel production and distribution, and the gray one coming from the use of the fuel, so what we burn in our vehicles. So it's clear, the first message, that when we compare conventional with alternative fuel like CNG and alternative propulsion like battery electric, we see very well that today what is providing a very bad footprint to battery electric vehicles is the manufacturing phase, because today this is a very energy intensive process. You see here we have an average value of 90 kilograms the CO2 per kilowatt hour battery produced. And so this means that the vehicle before start running has already emitted more or less the double of CO2 compared to a conventional fuel. Then, of course, we have what we burn on our vehicle, and here is the big drama from our side, where, of course, when we move from CNG and we move into all kind of biomethane, of course, our tailpipe emission, the gray one, are not affected. So tailpipe emission approach is blind with regard to the renewable parts. That instead is giving a huge contribution, and this is what is expressed by the orange bar. You see also this negative, overall negative balance that can occur. So when we compare the overall result about the cradle to grave emission from all these kind of vehicle, we realize very in a simple way, that today what the footprint coming from a battery electric vehicle is equivalent more or less of what CNG with the 17% mixed bio is also delivering. And in 2030, our 40% bio mix will more or less also be at the same level of what we can imagine for a BEV supported by the European energy mix that is forecast for 2030. So here is really the big message to say, it's not a question to go against electrification. Very often communication is made in this sense, but it's really time to change our mindset and policymakers' mindset, especially to say, let's try to find the way to create a level field ground where all technologies, and in particular biomethane, can be recognized. Because this is really what we have to solve in the next year. Try to really create through the legislative pieces that we are working on, and more specifically the CO2 emission standard and the renewable energy directive. But with this of course, also the alternative fuel directive will follow. But the real link that we have to try to build up is to try and include the fuel dimension into the CO2 emission standard regulation, because this is the legislative piece that is really driving the technological choice for OEM. And today, OEM has only one solution to solve the compliance with the CO2 emission standard regulation, that is going electric. There is no other solution. So this was from my side a few slides just to kickstart a little bit the discussion. Hope, and of course I'm available for your question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrea. It was really interesting outlook on the European, and we could recognize some of the discussions from yesterday also with the legislative part. Also, when we see more and more countries making prohibitions for the what's that called, the combustion engine for 2030 and forth, and how to separate that from the biomethane use. Do we have a question from the chat, Marlene?
Yes, we have.
Yes.
We have David Harron. Andrea, when we say cradle to grave emissions, we are talking kind of well to wheel equivalent. We can say for a life cycle assessment that for battery compared to gas, that on life cycle for vehicle gas look even better.
Yeah, of course. When so the cradle to grave compared to the only well to wheel, that is compared the fuel dimension during the production and the use. The cradle to grave adds also the manufacturing process and the end of life. And this is the big issues today when we look to batteries. So when we look to this average value of 90 kilograms CO2 emitted for each kilowatt hour of batteries manufactured today, this is an issue. Of course, there is a lot of research, there is a lot of progress, and this is, of course, we expect quite a lot of interesting results that also will be supported by the fact that the European energy mix that will support electricity production will go more and more towards renewable energy sources. So there will be, of course, progress in this side. But today, reality is that this is balancing. And just to give you an example, if we look through the time, the battery electric vehicles emit, looked on the life cycle assessment perspective, the same amount of even a petrol vehicle running for 50,000 kilometers. So before start giving a benefit to the environment. So this is really the key. So we have today this tailpipe approach looking to the CO2 emitted from the exhaust. That was a methodology developed just to translate the fuel consumption of the vehicle, but is not translating what the matter for the environment, that is the life cycle assessment footprint. So we have to enter in this mentality, in this thinking, when we assess all the combination of solution, fuels and engine technologies. So we are in, when we open to these new metrics, we realize that honestly, there is no reason to phase out internal combustion engine. On the contrary, is during this decade where we are anyway building, of course, and we will have to build all the recharging infrastructure that will be necessary, that we have to insist and to really have a better and clever use of internal combustion engine combined with clean fuel like natural gas and biomethane.
Thank you. Another question from Stefan, a guest. Why is it so hard to get through with the message?
Good question. Good question. Yeah, to make this message sexy, I think that we are working on this since several years now, and of course there was and this is also my personal experience being at the NGVA Europe since now almost 4 years, and I came in Brussels where there was the Dieselgate scandal that was exploding. This has been a tremendous effect on all technologies related to internal combustion engine, and really paved the way very easy towards the electrification. And there was this time where it was very easy somehow to transmit and sell somehow electrification as the panacea for everything. Of course, there is something that we cannot deny, that is that we cut off local pollutant emission, and that's why electrification makes perfectly sense in urban areas. But when it comes to this overall message and overall analysis under life cycle assessment, things becomes to be more complicated. So there was this timely event about Dieselgate that was really anyway blocking road for transmitting certain kind of message. There is also, and we have also to be honest, life cycle assessment is a science itself. It's not easy to be explained, to be kept. And also for this, on the Commission side, also there is anyway a little bit a schematic approach. So the different Directorate General from the Commission are in charge of different sectors of the overall history. So you have CO2 emission in charge of DG Climate, you have DG Ener covering the Renewable Energy Directive, and of course there are links, but there is this silos approach that anyway is very difficult to overcome, also from the policymaker side. So it's a very long process. Things are anyway coming, especially now. I think that we have the opportunity that the 2030 climate plan has set more ambitious targets. And anyway, also policymakers are realizing that electrification, of course, is coming, will come, but not at the speed that was expected. And this there is a very nice chart that ASEA published, putting the relationship, showing the relationship between the penetration of the market from electrified solution compared to the GDP of the different European countries. And it's true that electrification is just penetrating where GDP is higher, for instance, than 30,000 euros per capita. So these are signal and indicators that are on the table. So we will have to continue to. That's why we love and we like and we need to showcase this best practice in using natural gas, showing how already today we are contributing to carbon neutrality in a very pragmatic way, let me say, and very cost effectively.
Yes.
Maybe we can, we have some experience here in Sweden to discuss all good things that biogas can help the society with. And of course, I think we need to do the same discussions in Europe with the parliament people. And I know that we have some really good Swedish parliament members who can help us to do these lobby activities. So I remember from many years ago when we have an NGVA meeting in Brussels, it's a yearly meeting for maybe 10 years ago. We have the Swedish environmental minister there, and her advice was that change your name to the Biogas, Natural Gas, and Natural Gas Vehicle Association. I think that is good to remember that without biogas, natural gas have no future for the transport sector.
Absolutely, absolutely, and also the other way around. That's to say, policymakers need to understand that investments that today are made with natural gas technologies are the enabler for the future of biomethane. So it's a win-win. It's really a win-win, and yes, I think that we are also doing, and also I would like to thank also our colleagues from EBA, because we have a very nice collaboration also in trading this kind of message and showing this fil rouge that biomethane is offering in connecting the different sectors. So looking, of course, to the agricultural sector, to the waste sector, also supporting somehow the recent communication that also will provide some other legislative measure next year with regard to the methane emission strategy communicated by the Commission, and highlighting how biomethane can contribute in reducing the natural methane emission from the agricultural sector and the waste sector. So these are essential pieces of our society somehow. And also biomethane and the utilization of biomethane as a transport fuel, of course, is providing competitiveness, is saving and creating local jobs, so fostering and supporting the growth of local economy in a circular economy approach. So it's really something that is a fundamental piece of our society, especially now that we need also to try to get out from this year that was a catastrophe, but and so trying to foster our internal resources.
Yes. I think we're going to have to move on to the next speaker. Thank you so much, Andrea, and I hope you very much stay in the meeting for further discussions.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you.
So we will actually move on to a colleague of yours, Dr. Tim Keller. You're also within the NGVA, but you're the president in that organization. Welcome. I see your mic is on.
Yes, welcome everybody, and good morning also from my side, from Berlin here. It will be no surprise that my messages won't be too different from what Andrea already has alluded to, because we obviously work closely together and have our positions also closely aligned. But I would like to focus actually on the issue, what are activities that can be taken in the industry, and we already discussed that. But let's have a first look at the situation, and also at the situation that we are facing here in Germany. But generally, here you see the chart of the Europeans' final energy consumption we need solutions which go beyond electricity. This does not only apply to the transport sector, this applies to the heating sector, to the mobility sector, and so on. So electricity alone is certainly not the solution, despite the fact that this still is part of the political debate that we're facing in Brussels. And in particular, you have to recognize that electricity from renewables is only a third of the electricity that is being used in Europe. So electricity alone obviously won't do the trick. We need other solutions. We need green gases. We need biogas in particular, because we already have a pretty well-established infrastructure in place. By the way, electricity from renewables is, yes, of course, sun and wind, but the bulk load here in Germany is still coming also from biogas, and it is securely delivering electricity when the wind is not blowing and the sun is not shining, as it is today. Nonetheless, here in Germany, we're facing an intensive debate on the future of biogas, because the subsidy scheme, the so-called Erneuerbare Energiengesetz, EEG, is running out. After 20 years of subsidies for biogas installations, these subsidies will run out. We don't have a clear perspective yet on how this will continue. And worst case, this is the picture that you see here. Worst case, we will see the first closures of biogas plants for electricity production in the next 2-3 years, with a very steep decline during the century, which is a completely absurd situation facing the tight CO2 targets for the year 2030 and beyond. But this is the current status of the political debate in Germany. So we need to find solutions, what to do with biogas, what kind of sectors this potential energy can be delivered to. Transport sector is a big area, not only in terms of energy consumption, but also in terms of CO2 emission. What you see here is the CO2 emissions of the transport sector in Europe. And well, if I look at the German chart, it looks pretty much the same. The message is really clear. The transport sector has not delivered any CO2 reductions whatsoever over the last decades. Actually, the CO2 emissions of the transport sector in Germany are above the levels that we have had in the year 1990. So no reduction at all, actually an increase of CO2. And this actually, despite a multitude of different and individual regulation. What you see in this chart, I don't want to elaborate on the individual aspects. On this chart, you see everything that has been discussed in Brussels and decided in Brussels, trying to regulate the transport sector and trying to bring down the CO2 emissions. The result, as indicated in the yellow line, is actually not visible. So we have to state the regulation that the European Union was putting into place over the last decades is flawed. It's not delivering at all. It's moving the needle into the wrong direction. So it's not working in terms of CO2 reduction. So we need a very intensive debate on the way we regulate the CO2 emissions of the transport sector. And Andrea obviously already gave us some indications of what needs to be done. We have a perfect solution in place. I don't want to elaborate too much on this because Andrea did this already in a great way. Biogas is a plug-and-play solution. We have the combustion engine, which is very well elaborate in place. So we have everything to deliver carbon neutral mobility. But why doesn't it really take off? And why don't we see stronger communication? The fault is the regulation of the OEMs. What you see here is the basic principle of the CO2 regulation that the European Union is applying to the OEMs, to the vehicle manufacturers. Every manufacturer is measured at the end of the year by the average of the CO2 emissions of all cars that they have sold. And they have to reach a certain average over all these vehicles that they have sold. And in this average, an electrical car, a hydrogen car, but also a plug-in hybrid has very low CO2 emissions because electricity is counted for with 0 gram. a biogas car is accounted with whatever comes out of the tailpipe, this leads to the strange situation that a 3-cylinder Volkswagen up with virtually no emissions is considered worse than a big Porsche plug-in hybrid, which is accounted for in the books with 56 grams. So a complete absurd situation. And this scheme directs the car manufacturers, and this of course is making the market, because the car manufacturers have a strong power in directing the market in one direction or the other direction. So this chart explains very much why we see this strong slant towards electrifications, particularly as a failure of these average values are extremely costly for the car manufacturers. So we're talking about billions of euros if a company like Volkswagen or Daimler is failing to meet this average target. And this results in a strange situation that selling an electrical smart for Daimler, for instance, has a value, an implicit value of 20,000 euros in terms of avoided penalties to Brussels. So the electrical car, for instance, the small smart is the insurance to sell cars like the big G-Class that you see on the right-hand corner. So the regulation is clearly flawed. However, we have good solutions. I jump over here. So to conclude, we have a strange situation in the transport sector throughout Europe, despite an ever-tightening regulatory system and a continuous debate on tightening the targets. We don't see any CO2 reduction in this sector. The major fault, Andrea already has elaborated on this, lies in the fact that we have different silos in the regulation. The European Commission is regulating fuels, it's regulating vehicles, but it's not really interconnecting these sectors, and this leads to the situation that we're facing. So our clear mandate is that we need a major redesign of the CO2 regulation in transport. Otherwise, we won't see any CO2 reductions. And this, of course, is also the future for biogas and transport. And we fortunately have a big chance now, and NGVA is strongly working on that. The EU Commission will review this regulation and is starting this process right now to come up maybe with ideas on how to revise these approaches. And this is my last chart. I would strongly urge you to participate in these debates. You already have mentioned the influence of national politicians in Brussels. This is something that we certainly should focus on. One thing is actually that the European Commission has started a consultation process. One consultation is ending tomorrow. So I strongly recommend everyone who is listening, please have a look at this link, fill in your data. It's an online survey. And this will create, hopefully, a wave from the national countries to Brussels to put pressure on the policymakers that we need to change this strange situation that you see in the cartoon on the right-hand side. So let's unite. NGVA is our platform here. Andrea is doing a great job to do this. So let's get this moving. And this is the future for biogas. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tim. You even stressed what Andrea said even more, and highlighted the discrepancy with the regulatory factors, which is really, for all of those watching now, it's an outrage, more or less. I will just make it clear, if anyone feels uncomfortable with putting a question in English, please write it. You can write it in Swedish in the text, and we will bear the burden of translating it into Swinglish to the speakers. So
jättebra.
Tim, would you like to copy the link in the chat?
It's done.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
It comes the link. Yes, I think it's over your. What's your reviews on this, Bosse? It's
scary.
No, it's. I think it's important for us and our audience we have here and the network we have here in Sweden to listen what's happening in Europe, because we have a feeling that something is going in the wrong decision, on the wrong way, and you tell us that is what is doing now. So we need to act more, look up and look out in Europe and see if we can do something to support this, go in the right direction.
We have learned over the last 1.5 years in exchange with our policymakers in Berlin that you need to convey two very simple messages, which we quite often forget because we're too deeply
trip just up in the forest.
Because we're too deeply in the discussion already. One is the chart that I showed that electricity generally accounts only for 20% of our energy consumption. So we need to deal with the other 80% of our energy consumption. This is completely forgotten by many politicians. Then the second very basic fact, however, which is also always neglected, is if the wind is not blowing, if the sun is not shining, you won't see any electricity from wind turbines or PV installations. It's a very simple fact, but always forgotten. So you have to reiterate it every day.
I think the lesson we have learned here in Sweden, I think, and also my own work, is that we understand that all alternative needs to solve this problem in the future. And the best thing we can do is to focus on the advantage we have with biogas. It's not easy to let people understand the life cycle analysis, not even for scientists. So now we will also do it for politicians. So, but that I think we will need to focus on the big advantage we have with biogas. And
yes. One thing that strikes me is it's easy to feel that it's all up against us here. But as we can see in the figures from Andrea before, and we also heard really expanding figures for Sweden and for sure many other countries, that the heavy trucks are coming really strong. What is it that's driving that, hence all the regulatory benefits? Because we can see a strong development, nevertheless, in some areas.
Same in Germany, actually. We see a strong demand for CNG and LNG trucks. So that's a very quickly growing area. I think particularly in the heavy-duty trucks, it becomes more and more clear that there is no other alternative than biogas. Battery electric vehicles are way too expensive. You don't want to transport batteries, you want to transport goods. Here in Germany, we have this strange idea of concatenating overhead wires on the Autobahn. We have, I think, 10 kilometers with 2 cars running here. It's a little bit strange. And hydrogen still is on the verge. It's not as mature as it's supposed to be. So there's no alternative, and that's the reason why we saw over the last 2 years a very strong subsidy scheme here for heavy-duty trucks running on gas. That was also actually open to electrical trucks, but 90% of the money went to biogas trucks because it's simply the more economic solution. I see 2 questions here. Should gas cars have different emission figures for biogas and natural gas? Actually, NGVA is working on a more elaborate approach, which would take a little bit too long to explain here. But the general idea behind, yes, of course, we need to take this kind of approach. It's quite inspiring to have a look at the Swiss solution. They actually have implemented something like this, and we take a lot of inspiration from that. Then the question was the first consultation ends actually today at midnight, if I'm correctly informed. Sorry, tomorrow at midnight. But there's another consultation coming up that is open, I think, till beginning of February. So Andrea's nodding, so I'm not completely wrong here.
I have put yes the answer in the chat just now.
Then we have the question, what about fuel cells driven by LBG? Yes, indeed, we don't see, well, they still would have CO2 emissions because they need to have a reform on board. But actually, that's leading me to a complete different area, the heating sector. We see a strong take up of fuel cell heating devices here in Germany, growth rates of 50% annually now. We've got very mature installations, and we have a quite fortunate regulatory environment now that fuel cells and biomethane in new built homes are very much supported. So that's indeed an interesting area, but from my perspective, not exactly in the mobile environment, more in the stationary environment.
Thank you. And we will, I think that was all the questions from the chat. And even if it weren't, we have to move on to our next speaker. Please, you're welcome to continue the discussions in the chat or after the entire seminar as well. Thank you, Tim, for your
Thank you very much
for now. And so we will move on to Susanna Flüger from the European Biogas Association instead. Are you with us here, Susanna?
Yes, good morning. Good morning from Brussels.
There you are. Good morning.
I'm trying to share my screen as well.
Yes, we can see it now.
Great.
That's great.
So, yes, thank you very much for inviting me to speak here today. My name is Susanna Flüger. I'm the Secretary General of the European Biogas Association. So, EBA, just very briefly, if some of you don't know what EBA is, we are an association actually addressing all uses of biogas and biomethane, so be it for heating, power, transport, industrial use, and so on. And we also represent all technologies. So in addition to the traditional anaerobic digestion, we also represent gasification, biomass gasification, and power to methane. We have members all over Europe and even beyond, in North America, some, and in China, and indirectly and directly we represent over 7,000 stakeholders in Europe. So it's just a very brief overview of the biogas production at the moment in Europe. You see here, actually this is about biomethane. So when talking about biogas, the raw biogas production, we have almost 20,000 biogas plants in Europe. More or less half of them are situated in Germany. When it comes to biomethane plants, we see there really very much increasing growth over the years. Here on the left-hand side, you see the statistics until the end of 2018, and we are just about to finalize the statistics until 2019. And also over the last year, the growth was really good. We have at the moment around 3 billion cubic meters of biomethane, so 30 terawatt hours produced in Europe, which is clearly much more than 2.2 that was at the end of 2018. And there are particularly countries like France and also Italy that are increasing the production, but still, if you look at the right-hand side in per capita figures, Sweden is definitely the leading country when it comes to the biomethane production, also then followed closely by Denmark. And also we see now we had two very interesting presentations from NGVA Europe, and indeed the transport use is also something that we see is increasing importance all over Europe. So more and more we are dealing with the transport topics, particularly now when they are very high also on the political agenda in Europe. And also bio-LNG is getting more and more important. At the moment, around 2.5% of biomethane is liquefied in Europe, but this amount is also quite well increasing, particularly in the Nordics, but also, for example, in the Netherlands, and we expect the same to happen also sometime soon in Germany. When looking at the different consumption pathways of where biomethane is used in Europe, still lots of it is indeed used for the power production, particularly when you look at Germany, as it was said already. But there are countries like Italy, also of course the Nordic countries, and Estonia that are very focused on the transport use. So, but yeah, the market is rather fragmented in Europe, and then you see it also when you look at the consumption of biomethane. So very different consumption patterns. So the heating sector, particularly in Denmark and the United Kingdom, is important for the biomethane sector. Then when looking at production versus consumption figures and volumes, most of biomethane is still very locally produced and consumed. So in the country, within the country borders where it is produced, it is mostly also consumed. But there are some small exemptions already and examples for international trading. And we hope that indeed in the future we will have a complete European single biomethane. But at the moment, you see that, for example, Germany and Denmark are producing more than consuming, and then you in Sweden are consuming more than producing, mostly indeed biomethane from Denmark, and I think also some small part from Germany. Also the UK is slightly consuming more than producing, but we expect that this will also in the future look slightly different, and we hope that it will be possible to trade not only volumes but also certificates across borders. Talking about the future, as you know, the EU has committed itself to carbon neutrality, and there are also many national commitments in Europe. So we also need to decarbonize the gas supply, and this is a graph from our Gas for Climate report. EBA is part of this Gas for Climate consortium, and here you see that indeed we believe that it is possible to replace natural gas by biomethane and hydrogen. There is a huge potential for both, also for biomethane, and only to produce it sustainably, of course. So if you remember, I said at the beginning, we produce at the moment around 30 terawatt hours of biomethane in Europe, but the sustainable potential by 2050 is 1,170 terawatt hours. And already by 2030, it's 370 terawatt hours. So there is really a big potential there. And of course, we need a supportive regulatory framework in place in the EU, but we think that this is realistic. And there you see also where it shall go. Of course, biomethane and hydrogen should be used there in those sectors that are hard to abate, that are difficult to electrify. So these sectors include, for example, heavy transport and the maritime transport. When talking to the Commission, it sounds nowadays that they are mostly enthusiastic about the maritime sector, so the use of bio-LNG to decarbonize the shipping sector as one of the very few viable options to reduce emissions in that sector. But we also, as EBA, always underline that biogas is not only about energy, it also brings many benefits to the society, so the so-called positive externalities. It brings emissions reduction to the farmers, so extra income for them, makes their systems more resource efficient, and of course circular economy is a big topic in Europe, and biogas is one of the cornerstones. So there are lots of benefits also when looking at the whole system approach. When it comes to biomethane, you don't need to completely renew your infrastructure as we have luckily the natural gas infrastructure in place. Whereas when you talk about hydrogen, you need really huge investments to make it possible to start using hydrogen in Europe. So lots of benefits, and also we think that it's actually a cost-effective and cost-efficient way to reduce emissions. So this is a boring slide, I know, but it's about our policy asks, and there are. When talking about biogas, there are so many policy aspects that have an influence on our sector. So be it from environmental policy, agriculture, transport, mobility, and energy, and so on. So, but all in all, we are always asking for technology neutral policies. This is particularly the problem in the transport sector, as you know. Technology neutrality is actually one of the principles of the European Commission, but we don't see this taking place there in that side, even though we do see that they are quite nicely promoting different fuels. But then when it comes to the understanding of how the policies are connected, what are the interlinkages, there is still some lack of understanding. So yeah, coherent policies, legal framework based on the life cycle analysis important, and the sector integration, of course, to understand the links between different sectors. Renewable gas infrastructure also in rural areas important, because our gas supply will be in the future more decentralized, as biomethane plants tend to be rather in rural areas, and it's not so centralized as natural gas production. And there, indeed, we have a problem. There is a major exercise that the Commission is doing to categorize all economic activities according to their sustainability. So this so-called taxonomy policy, and the taxonomy policy is very NGO-driven, unfortunately. So they take a very black and white approach on what is sustainable, and yeah, there we, for example, must fight for the gas infrastructure to still receive investments when it comes to the extensions of the infrastructure to connect biomethane plants. Then the RED2 is also under revision, under review at the moment. So of course we want to have as ambitious targets as possible in place. And also we have received messages from the Commission that they want to create more targeted support for biogas in the new RED. So optimistic about that, and hope that they also don't too much start to play with the sustainability criteria that is only under implementation at the moment. And for trading, we need practical guarantees of origin, and we need to have facilitated trading of biomethane across borders in the EU. Alignment of the European Green Deal initiative. So just to, again, more and more sector integration, we need to see that, for example, the energy and climate plans, the national plans, are aligned with the agricultural plans. That is also the idea of the Commission, and of course very, very supportive, and hope to see biogas to play a big role there. At least we have understood that that the national attachés, energy attachés, have been very, very enthusiastic about biogas role in the EU's methane strategy, so a good sign. And gradually harmonized subsidy schemes in Europe. The last point, very, very difficult point, because we have probably as many schemes in Europe as we have countries. But this is still a barrier on the way to create a European market. So also the state aid guidelines giving recommendations for the design of national support schemes is under review at the moment in the European Commission. And yeah, we hope that there will be some sort of gradual harmonization, as difficult as it is, but it would facilitate our business very much. And yeah, it's just last slide, market and political challenges. We see that there is too much focus always on the so-called silver bullets. There was many years only of discussion of electricity and electrification of everything. Now hydrogen is also gaining importance. Hydrogen and electricity are both, of course, very important, but we hope that policymakers also understand that we need all different alternative and renewable solutions to reach carbon neutrality in Europe. Then the lack of European biomethane markets is still a problem to make really an industrial big market out of biogas markets. Black and white thinking on sustainability. We need all sustainable feedstock to really reach the potential of biogas. And we also think that crops have a role to play, not the primary crops, not the maize, but secondary crops, cover crops, all sorts of different alternative crops that can be co-digested with manure. And then biogas is, of course, a very complex topic. So as it is already in my previous slide, we are dealing with so many different things, and biogas helps the society in so many different areas, and it's sometimes difficult to make the policymakers to understand these links. So even if they don't understand the connection between vehicles and fuels, but it's even more difficult maybe for them to understand the links between agriculture, environment, energy, and so on. So very complex topic. But at the same time, we do receive, of course, not all Commission services are very fond and knowledgeable about biogas, but we also do receive positive messages from the energy and agricultural services, particularly that there is no net zero without biogas. That was also said by a high-level Commission official. We need an increased production of biogas in order to reach carbon neutrality. And biogas is finding finally its place in the European energy mix. There will be lots of it, but there will not be enough of it to use to decarbonize, of course, all sectors. We need to see where it finds its best use, probably indeed in the transport sector. And it shall receive targeted support from the Commission in the same way as they are technology biased, targeting electricity and hydrogen. We should all receive that kind of support. So thank you so much.
Oh. Nice.
Very nice.
Thank you, Susanna. We have some minutes before the break, so I will cut straight to the questions in the chat. I think first we're David Harron, who will speak after the break. He's asking, how do you interact with national biogas associations, and wonders if there is something that can be improved in that area?
Well, we do have continuous interaction, of course, with the National Association as well as our company members. We do have our working groups almost every day. There are working groups meetings taking place. We do also, of course, have bilateral contacts between us and the associations and the companies via emails and so on. So we do support them, but of course we cannot say to all of them what to do. We, at the national level, we are very focused on the European policies, and we do also advise them if they ask on the different uses, for example, of biogas. But I don't know if there is some more concrete question on what you would like to improve there.
I think I just have one question. The we have in your board, who is it?
It's Anders Mathiasen. I think he might be even at the meeting. I saw his name on the list of participants. Yeah. I think he should be there.
Yes.
Anders?
I'm here, yes.
Yeah.
Hello, Anders.
Great. And I saw further down in the chat, you also had a more specific question. You mentioned for sure biomethane will have a place in the transport sector, but do you see a future for biomethane in personal cars?
Yes, well, I think not. Also, it's very well. When looking at the Commission, I would not maybe be so convinced, but when looking at the current real situation in Europe, I think not everybody can afford at the moment an electric vehicle, and also as it was mentioned by NGVA Europe, this is not fully sustainable even, so still to a large extent our electric supply is fossil. So I think if you want to really truly start reducing emissions in all, also in the passenger vehicles field, then you should start using also bio-CNG there. But it's difficult because the Commission is so focused on seeing the silver bullets in different sectors. So biomethane, when it comes to the transport sector, they do see a role, but particularly in the maritime sector and to a certain extent in the heavy duty. But it's really a big battle there to convince them of biomethane also in the passenger vehicles field.
Yeah, thank you. Did we have?
Yes, we have from Stefan. We have several local politicians that have understood at least a number of the advantage with biogas, even if it's complex. Should it not be possible on the EU level?
Yes, it is possible, and we do have a couple of very good officials in the Commission who really understand this and who really support it. Also, the author, one of the main authors of the EU's methane strategy is a big supporter of biogas. So there are, of course, of those, but still having it like across the services of the European Commission, it's difficult. So yeah, and also there are all the time some changes within the Commission. So as soon as you have convinced somebody in DG Klima and DG Envy, then the person is leaving, and as it works always in politics. So yeah, we try to do our best to make them understand the linkages, and also the Commission has promised now the new commissioners that they will work less in silos and that they will try to work more together, collaborating with each other. We see this to a certain extent that it's increasing, but and we of course welcoming this action of the Commission, but it's still not enough.
Yeah. And we will have a last question here before we move on to the break, and it's from Sabini, who wonders, is there an official statement one could refer to regarding that biogas will receive targeted support from the EU level, or was that more a quote from some person?
Well, if you look at the EU's methane strategy, it says so. It's also the sector integration strategy. So the sector integration strategy was published in July, and the EU's methane strategy was published in October. So both of them are actually quite good reading. I can recommend. And both of them also do mention that that there will be more targeted support for biogas in the upcoming legislation. So, for example, the RVD and also the upcoming gas legislation. The gas, there will be some sort of gas package in the fourth quarter of 2021.
Nice, and we could try to put those links when we share the material, the presentations afterwards. So thank you very much.
Yes.
And we're actually right on time here, and I think we should stick to that scheme. We have really interesting presentations after break as well, where we will listen more to specific companies. We will hear from David Harrell in UK, and Mikael Antonsson from Finland, and Marcel Borger from Orange Gas. So we take a break until 10 minutes past 9. And please stretch your legs and grab a coffee, and we'll meet back here really soon.
Okay, see you.
See you.
Så mute.
Maybe mute that.
Hello, David.
Hello, Marlene.
Is it possible that you can share by yourself? Is it possible?
See?
Because
we had some technical
yes,
no connection troubles.
I don't get it via right Windows, you see. Yeah, yeah, good. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay,
That's
great.
Good. Thank you.
So then even the technique is at place, and the time is 11 past even. So we will push further here with David Harron. So you're from Air Liquide. You're the UK CEO for Biogas Solutions in Europe. And I will leave it to you from there.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity and some great presentations before, and we can definitely recognise the themes. I wanted to give a little bit of, as asked to give a reflection on where the UK fits. I'll give you a bit of an overview of where we sit in terms of the UK market. We've been active in biogas, or particularly biomethane, in the UK really since 2015. So we've had a 5-year growth period where we've been working. And I think it's, whilst the regulations have provided something of a stop-start motion, I think we can say we are on a positive trajectory. So there's lots of signs for optimism. Well, even when I'm looking wistfully at all the things the EU will do and know we won't be a part of that, we can see that there is kind of real opportunities still in terms of the frame of the market. So we see a lot more expansion ahead for us. So I want to kind of give you a background on what's happening. So a bit of introduction in terms of where we are in terms of the UK business. And we're part of a larger French group, and our colleagues in Fordens Gas cover the Swedish market. And I think Peter Mackinson is on the line in terms of the meeting today. Where we are is there's a lot of work on energy transition for Air Liquide, which is both CNG, LNG, and also hydrogen. And we're continuing to grow. So whilst it talks about more than 80 bio-NGV stations in Europe, actually we will end up with about 100 by the early part of next year, of which nearly a half are in Sweden. and 20% will be in the UK, both looking at trucks and buses in the UK. And that's the difference for the UK market. We have no cars, no passenger car market at all in the UK, and we foresee no opportunity for passenger cars in this area. Where we're working is everywhere from involvement in terms of the biodigestion. We've got sister companies capturing CO2 off biomethane, off anaerobic digestion. We're using purification technology that we produce in-house, and we're taking this both to natural gas, generally to the natural gas network. We have a very good natural gas network coverage in the UK, and that's going to both transport and to retail. The thing that's a little bit different in the UK is that we can have balancing of gas going into the grid against LNG coming out of the terminals, because it's seen as an interconnected system. So from a UK point of view, the government permits certification which shows actually LNG that's balanced against biomethane as classed as bio-LNG. Whilst that's been really positive at the uptake, we do foresee at some point there will become also liquefaction within the country, but at the moment the economics don't sit there. So unlike the plant we have at Lidköping in Sweden, where we are liquefying off the network or off an AD plant, we don't have any liquefiers that are working in the UK market at this stage. But we see this as a next step beyond. Just to give you a context, particularly where we started was the incentives for heat were particularly strong, less so for transport when we began. We're now at a stage where we have 9 sites operating, taking biogas from food waste and converting it to biomethane, which is then going into the gas networks. We own and operate all of those sites. And effectively, you know, there's now about 115 sites in the UK market, to give you a context. So what I was going to do was really focus though on the market itself and what we see or what's coming from that. And I have to give thanks to some of the parties we've worked with. We engage with a lot of number of parties in the market, including the Energy Networks Association, the Anaerobic Digestion Association, and also some of the gas networks that are doing some work in terms of looking at future trends. We sponsored a report that came out in March and was launched in Parliament last year. And the focus on that was really a vision to 2030. You know, there's a lot of message in there that there's a huge amount of organics that are treated as waste today, and that actually down the biogas route, there's opportunity to move that. Now, some of those areas you are far more advanced in Sweden. So separation of food waste, we are nowhere near as good at, and we have some changes still coming in the UK market for that. But there's a lot of other things in terms of manures, utilities, human waste areas as well, where we're not doing as good a job as possible. So from a UK market point of view, there was a real indication that if the policies were there, 8 billion cubic meters of biomethane additionally could be generated. And there was a huge opportunity for that. At the moment, there will be some new green gas schemes coming, and there's some changes in the network that they will move the funding for that gas from being general taxation to a levy on gas. So those changes are happening now. That pathway will move forward is a good question. And this is one of the causes we're now seeing, is that transport started to take off, and the reason Susanna showed a gap between what was used in the UK and what was produced is that there's import of gas for transport particularly has been part of the move to increase bio in the transport sector. And currently we're seeing about, well, in 2019 we saw 80% of gas was going to transport. Or 80% of gas was biomethane going into transport. We think that's more than 90% now. In fact, we ourselves have been running 90 or 100% since the beginning of 2019. About this time last year, the Energy Networks Association, which represents all the electrical and gas networks, also presented some pathways. We've been on a big journey in the UK that we are looking at our networks, and the fact that the vision was probably 5 years ago that there would be no gas network come 2030, certainly within a lot of the political circles. That's completely changed, and we've seen a major movement in terms of talking about renewable gas. Hydrogen was particularly sexy, but biogas is definitely, and biomethane is definitely part of that story. And effectively, the savings we're showing is there's about £13 billion a year benefit from going to a mixed gas and electrical solution than a purely electrical solution. What you're seeing here is one of the scenarios presented by Navigant, who did some modelling of the UK. And the vision for 2050 and net zero is, whilst there's 236 terawatt hours of hydrogen per annum, some of that with carbon capture and blue hydrogen, there's also a very significant 193 terawatt hours of biomethane projected in that model. And a significant amount of that also going into transport still, as well as some going into the heat pathways in terms of building. So there is a continued vision going forward in terms of the use of both biomethane and hydrogen into our gas networks. And whilst the gas total will fall, we're expecting that biomethane has its still major part to play. We've also been involved in publication of what we call the low emission freight trial, which was supported by UK government and was published on the sector with a number of players, including supermarkets and all of the major vehicle operators in there. And the key message we've got out of that is really that one that's already known, and particularly Andrea talked about the total life cycle. This is a well-to-wheel effect in here, really getting over that there is a massive opportunity now. There's no solution available now in terms of heavy goods vehicle transport, and we're seeing a real acceleration. The UK was a bit slower than places like France adopting vehicles because we use 3-axle and heavier duty vehicles. But what we're showing is 80% reduction with biomethane from food waste. Clearly, as Andrea shows, if we go to following the RED 2 and we get more manures and liquid manures in the mix, effectively we believe we can get to net zero. And we see that as part of the general transition going forward. But certainly there's been a real awakening in UK government that we see now that the majority of gas is renewable going into transport. It's opened some eyes and changed perceptions. So we're really looking forward to a little bit more vocal support from them following the publication of this report around trucks, both CNG and LNG in the market. Buses is much more complicated. We're still trapped in the area of zero tailpipe and a huge obsession out of London around electric and hydrogen. So whilst we supply the majority of the UK's buses, and we've got about 450 buses in the UK running on biomethane, the pathway forward is less clear as to what will happen on that. So lots of positives out of that. I'll leave those slides in the background, but really showing particularly a strong case for over 160,000 kilometres an hour in terms of the investment case for those trucks. And then we've also worked with some of the association or the gas networks with a report by Element Energy, which isn't fully published yet, but which is also opened up a concept which is proving useful within government. But we aren't advocating necessarily hydrogen as the final end goal for heavy goods transport. But what it's shown is there is a potential pathway there if we create refueling stations based on flammable gas, that those won't become stranded assets, because there was a lot of thought about trucks and interim solutions within government. So we're now seeing that we think out of that modelling that, you know, by 2025, there will be at least 70 stations in the UK using biomethane, maybe 170 by 2030. And that actually there's a growth until about 2035 in terms of trucks running on biomethane, after which there is a hope that hydrogen may come. But the reality is, what we're saying is the message is strong that this is a no regrets option. Doing biomethane now doesn't eliminate going to hydrogen in the future if that becomes proven. What it does do is it delivers immediate carbon savings. And that's really where the focus of policy should be today. Not waiting for the future, but delivering the carbon budgets and reducing the impacts now. And we're certainly seeing that moving forwards. And there's some very strong messages around that, because we have exactly the same story as across Europe. It will be no surprise. Since 1990, the emissions of CO2 associated with the transport sector have gone from being 22% to 34% today of UK total emissions. So conclusions are, we see significant streams of organic waste around to be transformed still. There is legislation coming, and we're seeing more talk about renewable gas pathways, and we're expecting to see big increases in both biogas production still and a massive increase into long-haul HGVs within the UK market. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. Nice to hear. And do I understand it right as that you see hydrogen gas more as a stronger case in the future than, for example, we heard from the previous speakers in transportation sector?
Look, we see there are areas for hydrogen gas, and we see that corporately as a wider opportunity. But I think what we've seen is there is a strength in saying that biomethane is a potential stepping stone to that, but also I think there's significant technical challenges to deliver hydrogen. So there are, particularly at the heavy goods end, we say there are no real working solutions that fit the UK market needs. So do biomethane now. It doesn't rule out, it doesn't create stranded assets particularly. We could convert those to hydrogen if it became appropriate. But personally, if you ask my personal view, we saw, deployment of trucks into the UK market took much longer to get to the standards and the proof and the confidence than we ever expected. So if we're sitting there talking about a peak of biomethane by 2035, that could well be 2040. There's a lot of things that are happening. The challenge we've got at the moment is everyone gets excited about what might come rather than what's deliverable now. And I think it's an interesting message, is not getting lost in the 2050 vision too much, but saying we have to deliver some savings now. We have to make the impact now, and this is possible now. It should not. It's that very much that no regrets option.
Yeah. That speaks for a lot of the frustration we've heard so far with the both economic aspect and emission aspect from biomethane reducing all those right now, where electricity comes in maybe more in the future. So that's the the overall impression so far.
Yes,
it's a big frustration. We're going to have to move on. Thank you so much, David. Hopefully you will stay with us if there are some more questions after 10 o'clock here. And we will now head over to Mikael Antonsson to see if you are with us. You're Director of Transport for Gasum. Hello, nice to hear you.
Mikael, det vore bra om du kan dela själv idag.
Of course, I will share my presentation.
Yes, please.
Great. There we see you as well.
Okay, do you see my presentation now?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Okay, thank you for having me. This is the first slide. Here it is. Sorry for that. But for you who are not that familiar to our company, Gasum is owned by the Finnish state 100%. So that this is kind of also a special arrangement in terms of ownership, but it doesn't mean that we not are to show profit. I can promise you that. Today, the majority of the business is run through natural gas and LNG, but the growing part of the business is biogas or biomethane. That is really growing now. And the market we are operating is in the northern of Europe. This has increased lately as we acquired the Nordic part of Agalinde in May. So now we are operating more or less in the northern of Europe, and then when it comes to Europe or the north is mainly into the maritime sector then. The Nordic operating environment. There's a lot of potential here, as you can see. If you only look into road transport, there's almost 200 gigawatt hours of energy consumed here. So there are lots of opportunities here, of course. And we need to have significant reductions of emissions, but also to increase sustainability. That is required of the market in the end. And this is led mainly due to that we have legislations, both national, but also in Europe, that is showing the direction of this. So this needs to happen now. But also that we have customers asking for this. It's not only legislation, it's also customers that are really asking for companies that are meeting this kind of objectives. So there is a real demand for sustainable solution, but also circular economy. And we have great opportunities here in the Nordics about the feedstock we have here. So we can really make an effort to support this. And we at Gasen, we love gas, that's for sure. And we are building then a network in the Nordics. And so far we have now 7 LNG terminals in Norway, Sweden, and Finland. And we also have the 5 bunkering vessels that is operating in the Baltics or the Nordic Sea and in the ARA area. And this part, the maritime sector is really now growing rapidly. So they are mainly consuming LNG, but there is a demand for liquefied biogas also here. One of the customers we have is Destination Gotland, who is running ferries from Gotland to Sweden back and forward. And they are trying now really to increase the share of liquefied biogas into the vessels. We so far have 17 biogas plants in the Nordics, but we are here really expanding. So both organic, but also in purchase. We 2 or 3 weeks ago bought the Skövde biogas plant. We will in Q1 open a new plant in Nymölla in south of Sweden, where we together with Stora Enso is using their wastewater in terms of production of liquefied biogas. And that plant only will produce something like 80 gigawatt hours. And we also are now close to be able to finalize or to start the project up in Götene, where we'll run that plant will be run mainly on manure. But we have also lots of other projects, not only in Sweden, but also in Norway as well in Finland. So the share of biogas will increase, and that is based on the demand we can see already now. And we also work with end customers. So we have now over 90 refueling stations, both compressed gas as well as liquefied gas. Let's focus a little bit more on the liquefied gas then. And the way we have been trying to grow the market here in Sweden, as well in Finland and in Norway, is to work closely with the logistic buyers here. To the right, you can see some different brands, and for the audience who is here in Sweden, they are most familiar. And those guys are now really, in their tenders, asking for sustainable solutions. And this is really pushing the guys to the right, the holding companies, to act accordingly. Because if they don't, they will not be a partner to the other companies here. But also that these companies are focusing more and more on circular economy. They have to take that kind of responsibility also. And this has proven out to be a strategy that is really growing the market. And so far this year, we have seen that it has come into something like in Sweden, 80 new LNG trucks. This number could have been bigger, but as you know, the pandemic has led to that both producers, Volvo and Scania, has had to shut down for some while, and that has also had an effect on the production of LNG trucks. But hopefully this will continue now to grow, and what we hear from the manufacturers is that there is a real good order base for next year here. So this will hopefully then grow even more now. One of the key drivers has also been that you can ask for a subsidy when you buy. You will get something like 40 to 60% of the extra cost buying an electric truck. And so far we have almost 1,000 trucks that has applied and been given this subsidy. And there's 3 different programs here. So this is also a good signal to the market that the government is supporting this transaction into more sustainable solutions. And you can also see here that some regions are more heavy, especially when it comes to the western part of Sweden as well the south. And that is based on that there are stations there. So this is also linked to if you have a liquefied biogas station close to you, then it's much more easier to go into this. So we need to grow the network also of stations. Another thing is that hauling companies really need to see evidence that they can stay competitive versus the fossils, because they have to survive off it. So we customer cases all over the time to prove this to the hauling companies as well to the logistic buyers. This is one case that we have together with Orkla and GGL worked, and then for 1 month they changed one of their traditional diesel trucks into an LNG truck. They use the normal case is to use a Volvo diesel that has 500 horsepower. In this case, they changed it now into an LNG truck that has 460 horsepower. This truck runs about 500 kilometers a day, and we have measured this really into the details. And it's the same driver, and it's the same load. In this case, it's 62 tons they are hauling all the time. And what we have found in this is that the consumption of LNG or LBG has been something like 0.22 kilos per kilometer. He refueled on average something like 137 kilos. And the average refueling time, now something happened here.
Yes.
Yes, the shared presentation went away. Maybe
Yeah,
you can try
here, yeah.
Just to remake it.
Yeah.
Because now we're running into some exciting figures.
Yes.
So we won't miss out on that one.
Because you're hacking from the oil lobbyist.
Might be.
It's really because in the...
Sorry for
well,
No problem.
Yeah, no problem. We could just tell us from the discussion yesterday, those were numbers that were really asked for from the actors, and we have another project to run from here in Gothenburg as well that is looking into those numbers as well, but more on a bigger scale. So we will also try to bring out some evidence for the
How do you see my
life cycle economy.
Yes.
Now it's
Yes.
better. Thank you.
Good.
Back in
And this is
business.
the outcome then. During this month in full operation, you can see the cost of LNG to the right. It ended up in Swedish krona, 37,000 Swedish crown. If you then would have used LBG, they used LBG in this case. It ended up in 39,000 crowns. The same truck run on diesel would have cost 52,000 Swedish crown and HVO 55. So here's the clear evidence based on invoices, because the hauling companies, they really would like to see invoices to be able to really see how this fits into the operation. And this is only one part of the TCO, of course. Then you also have to take in consideration the residual value and service and maintenance. And we have done that also. And that shows that if you run your truck on a yearly basis more than 80,000 kilometers, then gas is the solution for you. So that's this kind of a key point. If you run more than 80,000 kilometers a year, then you should go gas. Now there's
It's good news. It's good news.
Yeah. push me away.
Maybe it's Marcel, you have to wait some with your presentation. If you're trying to share already.
No.
Leave him alone.
It's competition.
This time I'm not pushing. This time.
Finished. No problem. You have 2 minutes left.
Okay. Okay. The ambition we have and the plan. The plan we have is to first build a network in the Nordics, and then it's Finland, Sweden, Norway that is containing 50 stations for liquefied biogas, and that will end up in something like 25 in Sweden. So far we have 13 stations, and we next year will build, how many are they? Some, but as you can see here in the map, we will expand this also now to Borlänge, Stockholm, Malmö, Stockholm again, Sundsvall, Gothenburg, Gävle, and we have also for 2022 that is then containing Luleå, so we will also be able to operate in the north of Sweden, Skövde, Kiruna, Stockholm, Värnamo, Vårgårda, and we are also kind of changing the concept of the station, because today a station looks like this. This is the station we have in Karlstad, but now we will also look into smaller concepts that is also enable smaller cities or locations to have liquefied biogas. And we also look into having this together with compressed gas, so we can enable buses or trucks that in the normal business case would not be a kind of business case for anyone. So by having the liquefied biogas, we can enable also the other players in this to be a part of the gas structure or gas business. That was all from me.
Thank you very much, Michael. And for us sitting in Gothenburg, those numbers are really interesting. And Gasum has really been pushing the development in all of Sweden. So it's really exciting times actually to hear those numbers from you as well. If possible, I think we should move on to the next speakers, and then we could better take all the questions afterwards, so that everyone who needs to leave at 10 could at least hear all the shared presentations. I hope that's fine for you, Mikael.
Yep.
And by that, we will welcome Marcel Borger. You had to correct my pronunciation there, Marcel. You're the founder and CEO of Orange Gas, a company has recently taken first steps into the Swedish market as well. There we are, a little on the side right now, but we still see you very clear.
Can you see me? It's okay. Can you see me and hear me?
We both see you and hear you very well, but you're
upside down.
I'm upside down.
But
no big deal.
No, it's no big deal.
But Marcel, can you share by your own?
Is this better?
Yeah.
Yes. Perfect.
Is it possible for you to share your presentation?
I hope it will be the first time in Teams. I have to try it, but.
Yes, we had some sudden problems here with the connection, yes. Unfortunately. So
just a minute.
Or else Marlene is also trying to work it out as we speak.
I will try. Oh no, this is. This didn't went well.
Pardon, we just a minute.
Yep.
We have some.
Ja, här är den. Ta den då.
We will see if it comes up on your screen right now. Doesn't really. It doesn't really want to connect in the studio.
Det är den här jag inte kan dela.
Just a moment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Man kan prova att dela skrivbord. Så kan de bara ligga.
Han är ju sist nu. Det är denna.
Är det David?
Förlåt, vänta lite, jag har den här. Den.
Ja.
Han hade bytt dator nämligen, så han hade så. Men kan de se detta?
Do you see the presentation now?
Nej, inte ännu. Jag har kollat min skärm.
Ja.
Det är det här som är problemet.
Man kan prova att dela.
Ja. Jag har testat innan, men jag fick inte till det. Testat innan.
I think you see it now.
Nu är den.
Du ser den nu, ja. Yes, Marcel.
What? Oh yeah, now I see it.
Yeah. You tell me when we have to go further.
Yeah, that's very good.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. My name is Marcel Borger. I'm the founder of Orange Gas and still CEO of the company. We were founded in 2008, and what you see here is the picture which we always start a presentation with is that we are, I think, one of the biggest fans of biogas, bio-CNG in Europe, but we have a mixed strategy. Because what we say is that we need all clean fuels to get to our goals in the clean mobility. And that's what you see here. We have our own icons per fuel. So at this moment, you see that we have biogas, green gas, as we call it in Holland, LPG, electricity. We put it as a source for making the clean fuels, and hydrogen. We have also CO2 for the cooling of the fresh trucks who are transporting fresh food. HVO 100 and ED 94, 95. We do that with, especially with Scania. We have some projects in Holland. So this is the picture of our station in the harbor of Amsterdam. So this is our first, what we call Orange Dream station, with several clean fuels. And we will open here in 2 weeks our second hydrogen station in Holland. Could you go to the next slide,
Yeah.
please?
Yes.
This is a little bit about the history. Founded in 2008. At this moment, established and active in Holland and in Germany. In both countries, we are at this moment market leader on the bio-CNG, the biogas, and we also have our own biogas production sites in Holland. Busy with hydrogen filling stations, because we think that could be the future. So we have already one operating in Den Haag, and the one in Amsterdam will open the next 2 weeks. We also put some superchargers on our Amsterdam locations, and also in the next 2 weeks we will open the biggest charger area square of the Netherlands in near to Schiphol. Of course, the reason why I'm giving this presentation is that we have started officially from the 1st of September with our first turnover in Sweden, with 4 biogas stations, a commercial and 1 bus in Helsingborg, what we took over from Ursenkraft. Nice to know is that this was a preparation of almost 2 years together with our orange friend Mats Eckelund, who at our answer. We traveled a lot around the country, Mats and I together. Mats opened a lot of doors for us, and that's one of the reasons we are now being active in Sweden. What is important to know, I think, is that 8-9 years ago, I already, as founder, said in our vision that we wanted to be active in Sweden, because for us, Sweden is like a little bit like the Mecca of biogas, driving on biogas in Europe. You don't have to tell the people in Sweden that you can drive on biogas or the production of biogas. It's already established there, and that's very nice to see. But I think as Orange Gas, we can add something to the market, especially on commercial and marketing point of view. But I will come back on that later. We also, from the 1st of January of next year, we will operate a bromide station, which is in a deal with Scandinavian Biogas. At this moment, Mats and I are very busy in trying to get more stations, or building ourselves, or taking over, or incorporation. And we hope to have at the end of 2021, let's say about 30 stations in Sweden. One thing I'm especially proud of is that we are finishing up our first own station, which we built on the island of Öland in Färjestaden. And that's where we have the biogas filling station. When you enter the island, second roundabout, or the first roundabout, it's near an inspection company, car inspection company. But we also have there 2 superchargers. And we hope to be in the second half of 2021, be active in Switzerland and maybe Italy, the north of Italy. Next slide, please. Good to know is that it's always good to say, where do you get your money from? Because it's not only us who is doing it. We have good shareholders. We have the ABN AMRO, who is Energy Transition Fund. It's like a green investing fund from the ABN AMRO. And what it also is for a long-term shareholder is Maywind. Maywind is a green fund where private persons can put their money in, and they invest in solar parks, offshore wind, clean fuel stations in Orange Gas. And then we have Jeroen Meijberg, who was a controller for 5 years, and now the last 2 years is becoming the CFO, and also a shareholder. And of course, as last, me as a founder, still shareholder, trying to develop the business in Europe. Next, please. What is important is that you see an Orange Dream Vision, what we call it. It's something we put on paper in 2010 already. So we were founded 2 years, and then we said we want to sell clean fuels. We are a retailer, but we will do it from natural sources. And what you see is that now we are from vegetables. We are selling from landfill already, and we do it from sewage companies. And now we are very busy in looking at, let's try to make it simple, as the power to gas solution. So, but then in a combination with hydrogen. So we are looking into making an orange factory from solar or wind, making hydrogen, and from hydrogen again, the synthetic biogas. And if you can manage this with the electricity grid and with the gas grid, then you have like a clean fuel refinery. So that is the part of our Orange Dream. But I think that this is the background of our goal, and our biggest goal is to become the biggest clean fuel retailer in the Northwest Europe. So that's what we are aiming on. If we'll become second or third, as Dutch often do in sport competitions, it's okay for us also. But we are aiming, of course, on the highest level to become number 1. Next slide, please. This is a little bit about our feeling. We have our Orange Gas standalone stations, and this is what we are also aiming on in Sweden. To put on Öland, we put our first standalone station with a small canopy on it, and in the right corner you see a bigger canopy, which will come also to Sweden. So this is our look and feel, and how we're going to try to get the people to the station and get a recognition. Hey, that's orange gas if you drive through. Next, please. This is an example of what we do when we are integrated in a big Esso station. There you see, this is one of our biggest stations we have at the moment. This is a 6-host station in Hanover, Germany. And here are buses filling up, light commercial vehicles, and person cars. Just an example to show that in Hanover, I think we are doing here in only this station, we are doing about 50% of the turnover in Hanover, where we have 6 stations in total. Next slide, please. This is Sweden. As you know, from 1st of September, we were active and having turnover, but we established our company as an active company on marketing and sales. So what we did is, as soon as possible, we branded the 4 commercial stations in orange gas branding, and we went to Sweden with Mr. Spark, our mascot, and went on the stations and did some promotional actions to our current customers to let them know it's not only the branding you see, but it's also orange gas. We want to welcome you to the station. And Mr. Spark also did some great adventures in Helsingborg city and walked around, and he got on a lot of pictures with people. So this was our first promotional action, and I think this is, and the other slides will show also, but this is exactly what we think we can add to the Swedish market. We don't think we don't have to what I said, we have to learn you that you can drive on biogas. We don't have to learn that the Swedish people how you biogas. Activity on the stations and what we call it in Holland, the old-fashioned, old-school sales. Just ringing on doors, telling people that they can drive on biogas, that we are there, and that we want to try to get them with promotional actions, but also with events when that's possible again, and also with some financial things. So this is the first start, and I think you will see Mr. Spark more and more in Sweden, I think. Mm-hmm. So and what you see is the left on the top. It's the station we took over on the big Preem station in Helsingborg. On the right bottom, that's on a combination LNG CNG. And left is what I said we are proud of, is our first own-built biogas station on Öland. Next, please. To give you an idea how what we are doing in Holland, marketing, that we have some customers like the taxi, what you call, let's say, disabled and student traffic with light vehicle buses. We have a lot of garbage trucks. We have the post delivery service as a big customer who is driving with almost 900 biogas buses on biogas. And then we have, for example, the IT company Cetric in the left bottom. It's they bought 210 Volkswagen Polos on biogas. And on the right bottom, that's, I think, a very nice story. Is this is an old picture from 2 years ago, but they now have about 80% of their fleet is on biogas, and this is the company Omrin, who is a garbage collector in the north of Holland, and we have a partnership with them from the first year on, so almost 9 years. when they started as a vision, we want to drive on biogas. And what we did together is we built a network. They bought the cars and the trucks and the garbage trucks, and we put the stations. And together we now have they have about 140 vehicles on biogas, and we built for them 12 stations in a rather small area. But this is a network where they can fill up and their garbage truck and collect the garbage. The nice thing is also that we buy the biogas from them. So they produce biogas. So what you see in the station in the north where they fill up with their own biogas, which is made from the waste they collect from the people. So this is a 100% circular example how you can arrange things. That's very nice. And the nice thing is that we build it up. We now have great successes with the two of us, and all these 9 years we have never had a contract. It's just a gentleman agreement from how can we build up the business, develop the market. So this is a great example how we are doing business, I think. Next slide, please. I think this is what I already said on sales and marketing is we have a bonus app, a loyalty app. At this moment, one of the only for only clean fuels. What you can do is that you can collect happy points, what we call it, and with these happy points, you can buy several articles, but also, let's say, holiday weekend. You can do some personal training with ambassadors we have, but also to charity. We select a couple of charities, and then you can also say, I am all the happy points I have. I make money of this, and I collect it give it to these companies. And it's also a navigation to the orange gas stations. You can chat real time during office hours with orange gas. So if you have a question, you can put it in, and you get a direct answer within a minute. Next, please.
I'm just, Marcel, I'm just going to give you 1 minute to round up because we've reached 10 o'clock for all the ones who's listening. And then we could take some more questions maybe afterwards, but just to make sure everyone gets the end of it.
Yep.
Please.
Okay, so the last thing is what we do is a lot of sponsoring to get attention for orange gas and the driving of biogas. Started with this picture because, of course, I know this is sports who is popular in Sweden, ice hockey. We have in the north, we have our own ice hockey club, the Orange Gas Capitals. This is a club who is really driven by talents and giving youth and women a chance. This is what we think is important. Next, please. We have a professional soccer club who is on the second level. It's called Cambuur. And here you see that we are on the shirt, on the back, and we are supporting them also. And this is also the same activity with young people getting a chance to develop. And the last one, I think. And this is one of the latest. Is what you see is that we are the shirt sponsor of the complete youth of a soccer club. And Mr. Spark is there with the introduction of new shirts. And the nice thing about this is this is very, they call it huggable, and there are a lot of parents around this club who are now getting to know Orange Gas and where we stand for. So this is, I think, says enough what we think and hope we can add to the Swedish market. It's not only stations, not only several clean fuels, but also sales and promotion, and to start to do extra market development. So that's it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Marcel. Nice to hear about those to arrive here to the west of Sweden as well.
Okay. Very good.
just to round up, because I know many of you are going to have to leave now at 10. We will stay here. We had some questions in the chat, which we didn't have time to take now. But at least me and Bosse will stay, and you're also welcome to stay. But the official seminar, I think we will end here, and thank all the presentations and participants to join us. And so we will close the recordings now. But for those who'd like, please, you're welcome to stay for after talks here.
Okay, very good. Bye.